Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you a wrap up of 10 books that I've recently read and all of my thoughts on them. I'll have content warnings in the description box down below in case that's something you need. Without further ado, let's get right down to the 10 books that I've recently read and my thoughts on them. We'll be kicking things off with a non-fiction, and that is Strong Female Character by Fern Brady. This is a comedian's novel all about her life, but rather than it being funny, it's more so about the fact that she is autistic, and as a woman she struggled to get diagnosed until she was an adult and further into adulthood, and it's telling about her life and everything that's happened to her. She has been through a lot. Okay, so I didn't quite expect this. I just knew that it was a comedian's memoir. I don't actually know that much about Fern Brady, so I wasn't going into it for her. I was more so going into it to see what the experience can be like as a woman who is autistic, who doesn't know this, who doesn't understand her symptoms, and who's trying to do her best throughout her growing up experience. Her parents are also very religious, and so there's a lot of religious trauma that she experiences, especially as somebody who was misunderstood because of her disability, and also as a bisexual and, you know, out and proud woman. And then she also had a very complicated relationship to her parents, who really struggled to know what to do with their child who just didn't seem to act the way that they expected children to act, and how different she was from all of her siblings as well. And reading this memoir was just really eye-opening, because not only does Fern Brady talk about her own experiences and what she went through, but she also talks about the facts, the figures, and what it means for all of these women who are passing and therefore are not getting the help that they need, and the aids and the understanding that will just help frame their life and make them feel less lonely and confused about what they're experiencing. And that was the main thing that I took away from this: how important it is for us to improve our awareness on autism, and also just how that looks like in adults and different people. What I will say about this memoir is that it is a little bit unstructured. It jumps between the past and the present day storyline, and I do wish sometimes that it was a little bit more focused, because then it could have been a bit more streamlined and just easier to read. And there is quite a lot of fatphobia and body shaming in this. Not necessarily fatphobia actually, but just body shaming for how women look like, how she doesn't look like, and how she wants to look like. So when you're going into this book, just be prepared for a heavy dose of that as well. But otherwise, I do think this is a really valuable memoir. I really enjoyed my time reading it, and I feel like I took something away and learned a lot from it. And I also really liked how Fern Brady was unashamed to just be like, yes, I do appreciate the fact that social media has allowed, you know, people to speak about their experiences and actually inform people in a way that sometimes the NHS, the medical system, is failing to do. But yeah, this was a really valuable memoir and very great disability rep, all own voices, and yeah, a really good one to read whether you know Fern Brady or not. So the next book I finished is a chunky 1,000-page classic, which I buddy read with Abby from Abby of Pelennor, and that is Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. Now this is one that I started a very long time ago. I started this back during the first outbreak of COVID. This was when I was in lockdown in the Netherlands, and I just wanted something silly and lighthearted and fun to read to help me through that period. I read the first part of this then, and I didn't pick it up until this year once again. And this one is about this man who believes that he is a knight. He believes in all of the chivalry and the books that he's read about knighthood and what they do, and so he's taken that on and he goes forth into the world to complete quests with his friend, who he decides is his squire, and those two kind of get into all sorts of shenanigans and troubles that are actually really normal things, but they believe it's like monsters that they're fighting and big battles that they're having. And I didn't particularly like this classic. I think in the first part I was having a very good, fun, silly time. I wasn't taking it too seriously, and there's some jokes in it, there's some good times, things you can laugh at, and you're like, oh, that's a really enjoyable story. And then after the first 200 pages, you know, it gets repetitive, it gets long, the jokes get worn out, it's tiring, and you feel completely fed up of the story and these characters. And that is the struggle with this. If this was a 200-page book, I think I would have enjoyed it. But the fact that this is a 1,000-page beast and it doesn't stop doing the same thing, it just got really, really frustrating. It's written in a chivalrous writing style, the way that knights speak. So it's got that old-fashioned, you know, touch to it as well. This is a translated classic. I can't speak of the translation, but it actually read quite well to me. My other thing that I didn't love about this is that it does have, you know, some racism in it. It has some sexism in it, a lot of misogyny, so it has got those elements in it, not in a way which feels overly problematic, but it is there within the classics, so you get to see that. And I just don't understand how this was so popular that he got to writing a 1,000-page book and he was like, this is what the people want. They want these silly jokes again and again. And the ending, the thing about reading a 1,000-page book, right, is that you're always going to feel nostalgic by the time you get to the end of it, because whether you liked it or not, regardless, you have spent a very long time with these characters getting from A to B, getting from page 1 to 1,000. So when we got to the end, I was like, oh, this is bittersweet, and it didn't quite end in the way that I expected it to, so I was feeling pulled at my heartstrings by the time we got to the end, even though at the same time I was thinking, thank goodness this is over. I will remember this book fondly because I had a great buddy reading experience with Abby, but is it worth reading 1,000 pages for this book? No, I do not think that it is. I then read When We Collided by Danielle Jawando. This is a young adult contemporary book set in the UK, and it's following 3 points of view, these 3 black teenagers that you see on the cover, and they witness a young black boy being stabbed, and everybody keeps walking past, nobody gets involved, and those 3 teenagers are the only ones who do something about it, and that is the moment when their lives collide. It then goes on to follow what happens with this young boy and what happens to each of these individual 3 teenagers. Now, the best way that I can describe this book to you is the UK version of The Hate U Give, because it is talking about police brutality, racism, the way black teenagers are treated and the injustice and struggles that they face, whether that be microaggressions or something bigger. It's also set in Manchester, so it's nice that we get a setting that's within the UK somewhere else other than London, and it was just so unashamedly black British, but really honing in on the black element to being black British. By having 3 points of view, she was also able to masterfully delve into all 3 of these characters' different experiences. So we've got Jackson, who is actually quite wealthy, his family's quite wealthy, and that puts him in a different class category than our 2 other characters, but that does not mean he has an easier time in terms of being a black teenager in the UK. We've got Mark, who is gay and also is a foster child, and I really loved his storyline in particular. It really got to me emotionally, especially as it talked about the depths of the foster care system and how awful it can truly be to be caught up in it. And then you've also got our female lead character, Chantel, and Chantel's story is one of a black woman who's doing better, who's moving forward, who's trying to change, but how people have stuck a label on her and they won't let her break free from her past or move forward. Reading this book was a lot. I actually got to halfway and I was just so burning with anger and sadness and relating to it so much that I actually had to put the book down and take a break, because Danielle managed to write a book that just encapsulated the experience brilliantly and perfectly, and I can't recommend this book more. I think it's a great one for people to talk with their teenagers about, but also just for everybody to read, to kind of get a better understanding of what it can truly be like living in this country with the perception that the media put on black people, and also just what it's like to live as a black person moving through the world of various classes and various experiences. Really well done. Even though it's one of those books that does delve into the topic of trauma, there are happy moments, there are hopeful moments, there's some really cute romances happening, but there's also such a strong semblance of community and friendship that is woven into this book. And I have to also say that Danielle Jawando's writing is really, really good. This is one of her earliest novels, and yet I could still tell that she's just such a talented writer and managed to evoke so much emotion within me, and in the young adult, age category nonetheless. So yeah, I gave this book 5 stars and I absolutely love it. I probably should have started with that, but yeah, this is probably one of the best books that I've read this year, and I cannot wait to read more by Danielle Jawando. Then I read a very different book, and that is Wicked Beauty by Katee Robert. This is the 3rd book in the Dark Olympus series that she has ongoing, and I also gave this book 5 stars for a very different reason, and it became a brand new favourite. So each of these books in the series retell a Greek mythology retelling, and in this one you are following Achilles, Patroclus and Helen. Yes, my friends, you are going to get a polyamorous book with this one. In this book, Ares is dead and because he's dead, you are going to be finding the next Ares. And in order to do that, because of the type of god that he is, the god of war, they are going to be running a trial, and anybody can enter, and the winner of the trial is going to be crowned the next Ares. And what Helen doesn't know until the trials kick off is that the winner of the trials has been told that they will win Helen's hand in marriage. So what Helen decides to do is to take back her own story and enter into the trials herself. Achilles and Patroclus are also in the trials, and so that's where the story begins and opens. And I have to say, I had the very best time with this. This is a steamy retelling, so do be aware you're going to get a heavy dose of steam, and Katee Roberts' steam is some of my favourite steam out there. I don't know how to put it in this category, but the relationship dynamics you get here is very complicated, because Achilles and Patroclus are in a long established relationship, which is an open relationship, so they also have other partners, but they are still, you know, agreed upon couple. And due to the politics that you get to understand within this world, you know, they're not sure how long their coupledom can last because of the political system. And with them both being attracted to somebody else comes the big question of what their relationship dynamic really is. Will they be able to survive having a third person there? Is having a third person there what they actually want to do? But also they're all competing in a trial where Helen's hand is what could be won. So that means there's a big power imbalance, and the stakes are not the same for all of them in this trial, which again complicated the relationship situation all the more and added a heavy dose of angst, which is what I particularly love to see in a book. And also you get to see all of their dynamics together. Patroclus is still the sweetest character in literally every iteration of him that I read. I love Patroclus. I really liked Helen in this as well. She is a woman who has been through an abusive relationship, as you quickly learn and see, and her ex, who has been abusive to her, has entered into the trials for her hand. So you can imagine how stressful that is for her. And she, even though she's like really struggling with healing, with moving forwards, with trying to get over this abusive relationship that she's been part of in the past, she's also still at the same time really strong and really independent and doing things, even though people say that, why is she entering into these trials? She will never win. What is the point? Is she just making a statement? And so I really respected Helen in this book, and I really liked her attitude and how she didn't feel like a damsel in distress as most of the Greek myths paint her to be, but also she wasn't like overly strong. She was still struggling internally with a lot of trauma that she had to work through. Achilles, no matter which version of Achilles I read, annoys me. Song of Achilles annoys me. Greek mythology annoys me. I just cannot stand Achilles and his overconfidence. And yet, you know, this version of Achilles, I actually liked him, and that is a first. That is the first. I've never liked Achilles before, and I'm not gonna say he's not as frustrating and he's not as annoying and he's not as cocky and overconfident as he always is, but there was just something about the way that Katee Roberts portrayed him that I could still get behind his romance. And the steaminess was steamy. I loved the dynamic in the bedroom between the individual partners and all of them together. It was really hot. It was really steamy. Ooh, this book burns to hold, which is what I like. And then I do want to say also that the reason I gave this one 5 stars, whereas the previous books in the series have been 4 stars, is because one of the elements that I really like in this series is how political it is in terms of like the world building and how the 13 are established and treated and change. And it stepped up the politics here, but it also actually did do the trials fairly well. The trials were difficult, the trials were suspenseful, the trials had action scenes and moments in them and had a plot actually going through this. And I can appreciate when a book is technically like a steamy romance and it has a good balance of plot as well. I find it so hard to find books that balance those two elements the way that Katee Roberts and Sierra Simone really do, and I'll happily continue reading that series. I also read The Boyfriend by Freida McFadden. I just happily read my Freida McFadden thrillers lately, and this was no different. So as always, she has 2 different timelines running through this. There's the past, where there's this young teenage boy who's really in love with this girl, but there are people in town being murdered. And then in the present day storyline, we're following this woman who is going through her online dating experience as she tries to find a boyfriend for herself. And she finds this really perfect, really dreamy man, but maybe he's a little bit too perfect. And it's about how those 2 storylines tie together and about murders as well. Now, of Freida McFadden's thrillers that I've read, I actually think this one is my least favourite, and that's because I really struggled with the online dating experience that was shown here. It was very, very superficial. It was just a way of describing like what you need to put forward in online dating to make it seem like it's all about looks, it's all about first impressions, and it just felt very superficial, a depiction of online dating, even though some of it did ring true, like, you know, about how much it's like shopping and how hard it can be to find someone decent and how sometimes you're catfish. I don't think there was a lack of truth in this. I just do think it was a very superficial depiction of online dating. And our main character is just like, I was screaming at her so much internally. I was like, you're making the wrong choice. Why are you doing this? Like, think about things for 5 seconds and maybe you won't make the mistakes that you're making. And sometimes when you're reading a thriller, that's kind of the feeling that you want. You want the don't go in there, don't split up kind of dynamic. But this kind of took it to another level where I was like, this girl ain't got no brain cells. So I had to suspend your disbelief, but also suspend your frustrations with the main character a bit to enjoy this one. I have read enough Freida McFadden thrillers now to actually guess the plot twists and guess what's happening. So this didn't actually shock me, but that's comforting to me. It's comforting when I read thrillers by an author so well that I kind of know what to expect and I can guess and I can maybe be right and find that very satisfying. I wouldn't say that this book is predictable, but I do think it is more predictable than her other ones that I've read. But I can understand why this was kind of one of the ones that was the most popular with people, because it can appeal to those who have gone through the terrible online dating pool and can see where it goes as wrong as it possibly ever could in this book. It was fun, it was a good time. On to the next Freida McFadden thriller. We are now halfway through the books, so I've got to say a big thank you to my patrons who subscribe over on Patreon. If you sign up to any tier in particular, you get some exclusive wrap-up videos from me, as well as some other things that you get when you sign up to my Patreon. So if you want my thoughts on Girl Dinner by Olivia Blake, or you want my thoughts on Extremity by Nicholas Binge, please head over to my Patreon and there will be an exclusive wrap-up either there or coming very soon. Back to the rest of the books, I read a horror book and that is called House of Idyll by Delilah S. Dawson. This is the third Delilah S. Dawson book that I've read, and according to me, it's the best of the three. This is a standalone and it's about a cult, or something that seems like a cult, because our main character, Angelina, is living in LA and all she wants to do is make music, but she is stuck being a barista and just trying to make ends meet. And on a day where everything goes wrong, a member of her favorite rock band rocks up, takes her in the car and drives her to this commune in the middle of the woods where she can stay for free as long as she wears white like everybody else. Food is paid for, cleaning is done by others. All you have to do is stay, sign this contract and create to your heart's content. Sounds very iffy, right? Sounds like there must be a catch, and that is what this book is about. I feel like Delilah S. Dawson's writing has only gotten better and better with every single book, and in this one all the more so. I could easily read this like it was a film. It felt like reading a film because I could visualize every single thing that she described, and the sense of atmosphere, like something is not really right, something is very strange, something is off, something is peculiar, was suffocating while reading it. And that is the feeling that I want to have when I read my horror books, and I couldn't help but relate and kind of agree with our main character Angelina. If Beyonce rocked up outside of my flat right now and said, come with me to the middle of nowhere, sign this contract and you could just write your novel and I'll pay you for that, I would do it. I would absolutely do it. So I could absolutely understand why Angelina would fall into this spiral. And while there are some questions that felt a little bit unanswered by the end of the book that I wanted to have wrapped up, I kind of respect that it didn't do that, and that you get enough answers to be satisfied and enough of a sinister ending to feel a bit creeped out by the end of it. Skin by Ibi Zoboi. I've read many Ibi Zoboi books and I just tend to really love them, and this was no different. This is a novel in verse, a fantasy novel in verse, where we're following our main characters and they are old hags. So old hags are people who can... Actually, they call them something different. They call themselves succulents. So depending on where you go across the islands, these creatures are called something different. In Jamaica, they're called old hags, but in different islands, they're called succulents. And what they do is, at night, they take off their skin and they become a ball of light, and they drink from people's life forces and then have to go back into their bodies. And you're following these two characters who don't know that they have a connection to each other, One of them is a very dark-skinned teenage girl who lives with her mum, and they are both succulents, and she isn't sure that she wants the succulent lifestyle for herself. She just wants to be a normal teenager. And then they are now immigrants in America for the first time, trying to make ends meet. And then we have our other character on the cover here. She has lived in America all her life. She doesn't know her mother, and she is very light-skinned and very beautiful, but she's really struggling with her skin and her health. There's something happening to her and she doesn't understand what it is. And it's about what happens when these two teenage girls' lives conjoin and collide, and both of them kind of learn things about themselves and their upbringing that they didn't know before. I really enjoyed this. It is teeming with Caribbean culture and also with Caribbean like mythology. So there's jabs in here and other creatures as well, and it's just so nice to see that mythology woven into a story. If you're not familiar with it, it gets explained along the way, and it was just so much fun to kind of delve into these creatures. And also, I just never see or read fantasy novels in verse. It's always a YA contemporary novel in verse, so it was really fun to have a different genre, and I really appreciated how the poetry was done here. I think, you know, Ibi Zoboi had so much fun playing around with the words on the page, with the perspective, and especially towards the end, the way that the poetry tied in with the narrative was impeccable, perfect, and I think the novel in verse format suited this story so very much. I really liked how this handled its topics and themes that it delved into. A lot of it had to do with family dynamics and how your family treats you, and family history. As well as this, it also unpacked a lot of thoughts and feelings around concepts of black beauty. What makes a black woman beautiful? Are you too dark skinned to be beautiful? Is light skin the ideal? What's your hair texture? Kind of delved into that. And also a lot of this also focused on the immigrant experience and what it's like being a black immigrant in the US. The only thing that I would say is that I wanted a little bit more out of the ending. I think the storyline that revolves around family dynamics could have used a bit more wrapping up and a bit more of a hard hit by the end, but that's just the tiniest niggle in what I think is a very good book that I would recommend. I read something I really didn't like, and that was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This was my mistake because I accepted a bundle of classics and I didn't realize that they were concise classics, which means they were abridged classics, and I don't particularly want to read my classics abridged. And you can get into a whole debate, because what these concise classics are doing is that they're removing the problematic elements from the classic text. It's taking away the racism, it's taking away the misogyny, and it's just leaving the meat and the main point of the classic behind. Especially easy to do is something that is non-fiction self-help, one of the earliest iterations of non-fiction self-help, such as Think and Grow Rich. And then as well as that, it also summarizes a certain number of pages. So it'll give you a passage that's from the original text, and then it'll give you a bit of a summary applying it to modern day. And I have to say, the original classic text for this book is quite straightforward. It's easy to understand. It doesn't need a summary next to it. Like, you can just think and understand and deduce. I don't think it's like Shakespeare where you need that translation next to it. I do think it's simple enough. What I didn't like about the original text either is that Napoleon Hill writes in capital letters, so it felt like shouting. He'd be like, "You think you can grow rich, but what you need to do," and that is kind of how it was written in the page, with those bits being in capital letters. And I was just like, this is a headache to read mentally from the way that he wrote it. And then a lot of his advice around how to grow rich is to think about growing rich and manifest it. And I just don't really believe in self-help books where it's all about manifesting and thinking and thinking and thinking without giving you like clear and concise actions of what to do and steps that you can actively take other than just manifesting. I do think manifesting is a contributing step to doing whatever you want to do and achieving whatever you want to achieve, but I think there's a whole lot more that needs to be done too. And so if we take the subject matter, I didn't like it and I didn't agree. If we take what the classic edition itself is trying to do, I didn't like it and I didn't agree. I do actually, even as much as I don't enjoy reading books that are heavily dosed in racism, I do think it's important to include and keep those elements in there so that you don't get a misunderstanding of what a person was like and what they believed. And so I do think we should keep the original text the original. If it's super racist, I'm not going to read it, but that is my choice and my prerogative, and let people read the original text if they want to. Let there be a abridged version for them to read if they want to, but always make sure to let them know that they are reading something abridged. And I appreciate that this had an introduction that let me know, and I should have just not read the book, but I did, and you get reviews like this when I do that. The next book I have here to talk about is Demon Song by Kelsea. This is a horror novella which is a retelling of Phantom of the Opera, and it's set in Beijing in China. And I enjoyed this. I had a good time with this. I read it all in one go on reading sprints because it's just that quick to whiz through, and I liked what it did. I especially liked how it brought together a Chinese myth which you read throughout the story through the main character's eyes and gets kind of like explained to you, and that myth tied in very, very well with the Phantom of the Opera retelling elements. And I think it was so clever how Kelsea fused together these two classics from different cultures and made them into her own story. I liked the setting of it being in Beijing. I think the setting was very cool. It had all its nooks and crannies and things to explore. The atmosphere was done very, very well. You got a sense of something being strange and disturbing and scary. And this also really centered on a mother-daughter relationship, because our main character is a teenager and her mother is keeping a lot of secrets and is struggling through a lot of abusive relationships, and she as a teenager has to witness this and see this happening to her mother again and again, and it's about how she feels about that, but it's also about how that strains the relationship between her and her mother, especially when her mother is not listening to her or understanding that she does have a stake in these relationships because she has to live with these men as well. So I really like how this book handled all of its themes and its moments and its storyline, and it was a good time. I just don't think it's going to be a very long time to me. It accumulated to something good. I liked where the storyline ended. I actually don't have any complaints with this one. I just thought it was a very good story and a really nice reading experience, and you'll either enjoy it for what it gives you or you're just going to read it and move along. Then last but not least, I read An Impossible Thing to Say by Arya Shahi, and this is a young adult contemporary novel in verse. And in this one you're following Omid. He is a Persian teenager who lives in the US and has lived in the US his whole life, and when this book starts, his grandparents are moving from Iran, I believe, and is coming to the US for the very first time, and he's not known his grandparents ever because he was so young when they moved away from Iran. And so now that they're finally getting to meet their grandparents, it's about tackling that feeling of I love someone because they are my family but I don't actually know them very well, and I'm getting to know them more. It's also set around the time of 9/11, and as people who are Middle Eastern, they start to face a lot of xenophobia and racism. And then the other storyline to this, which is where I got my interest in this book from, other than it being a novel in verse of course, is that at school they're putting on a play of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is a Shakespearean play, and Omid is feeling very tied to this play and that it reflects a lot that's happening in his life, and it's about his experience, being part of this play and how it ties into everything else happening with him. For the most part of reading this novel in verse, I really enjoyed it. It is very good, and I really do like its depiction of poetry, as in how the novel in verse is written. I think it's stylistically done very, very well. I think because Omid is going through so many emotional thoughts and internal processing and struggling to say how he's feeling, that tension in his identity and tension in who he wants to be is really, really shown throughout the poetry in this novel in verse. So got a really nice representation of a male friendship, these two boys who are navigating secondary school and their emotions and their jealousies and their respect for each other. And so much of this is about family ties and family relationships, and a lot about culture and being a teenager who is balancing between these two cultures and how he faces a language barrier, but also he is different from his students in his class. So I liked how it tackled all of these themes, and I was really, really loving this. But it's a 400-page novel in verse, which is quite long for YA novels in verse. They're not always this long. And I was like, where is this going? What is this amounting to? Because the plot was quite coming of age and very winding. Then we got to the end of the book and I was really, really disappointed because the end just finishes and it starts so many plot threads. There's this whole plot thread of him and the play, him and this girl he likes at school for the first time, him and his friend and them developing their friendship, something to do with his grandparents that I don't want to spoil. And all of these threads are left in the middle of their storyline when this book finishes. There's no conclusion to any of them. And I am someone who is a fan of an open ending. I love when, the book finishes and it's did this happen or did this happen? Or is this going to happen next or is that going to happen next? But there's still an art to setting up an ending like that. You still need to leave the reader knowing there's one or two options, or three. but some. You can't just leave every thread open, every thread unfinished, undealt with, untackled, because it just feels like a half-finished novel. And that's the impression that I got from this novel at first, unfortunately, because there was just so much left open-ended at the end and unsolved. So in the end, I was quite disappointed in this one, and I was like, what was the point in that? It's a beginning of a story and nothing more, nothing less. And it is a standalone online, so that's that, unfortunately. And there you have it. Those are 10 books that I recently read and all of my thoughts on them. Please let me know in the comment section down below what was the last book you finished and what did you think of it. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!